Hello, good evening, and welcome to WMT Reviews 12 Nights of Halloween. I am Wiseman Tanofsky. You know, last year I got off rather lucky with the films that came off the randomizer, with even the weakest film still being pretty darn enjoyable. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for this year. Here's a brief list of things which spring to mind when I think horror film. Monsters and madmen, vampires and werewolves, ghosts and ghouls, dark hallways, eerie cellars and the like. I do not think of little Irishmen in green suits with a taste for gold and polishing footwear. I don't think I can even qualify a leprechaun as a monster. It falls under the same sort of category as a fairy or a faun. Not the Pan's Labyrinth variety, more the Narnia variety. However, someone obviously thought they were the object of terror and set about to make a movie to prove it, with tonight's Halloween run-up movie, Leprechaun. Starring Wicket W. Warwick, or to use his human name, Warwick Davis, in the title role, Leprechaun is what is commonly known as a horror comedy. No doubt because the audience were laughing instead of being afraid, so the people who made the film decided to invent a genre to save themselves. In any case, this is the WMT review of Leprechaun. So what's the story? Dan O'Grady, played by Shay Duffin, returns from Ireland having stolen a leprechaun's enchanted gold, thinking to enjoy his newfound wealth. He thought wrong, as the leprechaun, played by Warwick Davis, pursues him. O'Grady manages to trap the creature until the house is moved into by J.D. Redding, played by John Sanderford, and his family. Their dim-witted friend Ozzy, played by Mark Holton, accidentally opens the leprechaun's prison, and havoc ensues as it ruthlessly hunts for its stolen gold. When Redding's son finds the gold, the group return it, hoping to rid themselves of the leprechaun. But Ozzy ate the last piece, and the carnage continues. Finally, Tori, played by Jennifer Aniston, learns from a dying O'Grady that a four-leaf clover will destroy the creature, and the leprechaun suffers an explosive demise at the bottom of a well. I think this film's biggest failing is the fact that in spite of a great effort by Warwick Davis, leprechauns are just not scary. They're just not. Had they been, or had that managed to have been achieved by the movie, it would score much higher because it does do very well to cover all the usual bases of film that I'll enjoy. Practical effects, cool makeup, subtle special effects, and an attractive lead and all. But unfortunately, the film does very little to make the leprechaun scary. As I say, the makeup was cool, but when your villain is riding a tiny tricycle to hunt down their victims, it's not exactly Michael Myers. With this failing, the movie's other faults are all the more obvious. The script isn't tremendous, a lot of the acting is wooden and unconvincing, and the story goes round and round in circles, repeating itself. In spite of this, I do find moments of it enjoyable and funny, no doubt inspiring the horror comedy genre to which it's associated. And I like to think of it as being a breaking-in film. If you want to introduce a nervous moviegoer to the horror genre, I would start with a film like Leprechaun, because it's not scary. Okay, on to the cast. Jennifer Aniston is probably the second best thing in this movie next to Davis himself. She does her best with the script she's given, and it's pretty much the same as other television stars moving into film. It's more a case of she's nice to look at and it's fun to watch her suffer. But she's a damn sight better than the rest of the cast, none of which seem particularly invested in the story, which is easy to understand. As regular viewers will know, I detest child actors, and this one is horrendous. Robert High Gorman as the young Alex is consistently annoying. And while his friend Ozzy is rather fun to watch, it's only because the movie pokes fun at his obvious disability. You can tell this movie was made in the 90s, because the line, "you can get yourself an operation to fix your brain," is actually said, and no one went nuts. Barely making the passable list would also include Duffin as O'Grady, though that might just be because he barely has any lines, but I thought he did alright. Let's be honest here, the film was held up by the sadistic antics of Warwick Davis as the leprechaun, and he remains to be the only reason I even decided to include this series in my collection. Davis creates a fascinating, cackling little creature, running around causing mischief with a serious mean streak whenever his gold is involved. As I say, I loved the makeup, and at least it made an effort to make him look somewhat scary. Everything else was held up by his performance, hands down the best part of the film next to Aniston's legs. It's really rather bizarre. You can not enjoy this movie, but still find the leprechaun interesting and engaging. The fact that he can just pop up at any moment really does keep you on your toes, and at least makes this element of the film enjoyable. Now, I normally don't talk about the sequels in these reviews, but Leprechaun's biggest failing can be seen by comparing the original to the films which follow, 2, 3, In Space, and In the Hood, and so on. Where these films succeed is the fact that they almost completely abandon the genre of being a horror film, except perhaps for the gore factor. They focus more on the comedy side, almost becoming a parody of the increasingly dissipating slasher genre at the time, similar to films like Scream and to a lesser extent the Scary Movie franchise. But because this was their first outing, it really feels like the film tried too hard to be taken seriously with its less than credible content, trying to hide subplots and themes of greed and commercialism in a film about a randy little creature perving over Aniston. But of course, the audience weren't intimidated at all by the little creature, and the film and the franchise simply became something of a joke. A joke which later movies simply embraced. But it's difficult to watch the first film and not feel like they tried and they failed to make a horror film. It's not to say the movie isn't enjoyable, but I believe the phrase, "so bad it might be good," was coined for exactly this kind of film. As such, I'll award the film a below average 4.5 on the Awsometer. It's a below par horror film, but at the very least an enjoyable comedy, with a great performance by Warwick Davis, a hot female lead to distract you, and a decent balance of practical and special effects. So that's a 4.5 on the Awsometer for Leprechaun. I've been Wiseman Tanofsky. This has been WMT Reviews 12 Nights of Halloween. Thank you very much for listening.